She spent 4 years secretly loving the most popular boy in her Korean high school. He never noticed she existed. 10 years later, he walked up to her at their reunion with his famous smile, expecting another woman to fall for him. Instead, she looked him in the eyes, smiled politely, and asked one question that shattered his pride. "I'm sorry. Have we met before?" What he didn't know was that the woman pretending not to remember him had once loved him enough to write a letter she never sent. And before this story ends, he'll do everything he can to become a man she'll never want to forget again. Before we continue, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss lovely Afro-Korean stories. The chandelier lights inside the Grand Aurora Hotel glittered like stars trapped beneath crystal. Soft classical music drifted through the ballroom as elegantly dressed guests laughed over champagne and exchanged business cards. Waiters in crisp white uniforms glided silently between conversations, carrying silver trays filled with hors d'oeuvres. A giant digital screen near the entrance displayed elegant gold lettering. Seoul International High School Class of 2016. 10-year reunion. Laughter echoed across the ballroom. Old classmates embraced after years apart. Some had become doctors, some lawyers, some entrepreneurs. Others proudly introduced spouses and children through photographs on their phones. It felt as though 10 years had vanished in a single evening. Near the center of the room stood the man almost everyone had been waiting to see. Kang Seo-jun. Tall, broad-shouldered, his tailored charcoal suit fit him perfectly. His calm confidence filled the room before he even spoke. Time had only sharpened the features that had made him the school's most admired student. If anything, he looked better than he had at 18. "You haven't changed at all," one former classmate laughed, patting him on the shoulder. "Still stealing everyone's attention." Seo-jun smiled modestly. "I've just been working." "Oh, come on." Another friend shook his head. "You became CEO before 30. You've been on magazine covers. Half the women here came because they heard you were attending." The group burst into laughter. Seo-jun rubbed the back of his neck. "I doubt that. You always were humble." "No," another man interrupted with a grin. "He just knows it's true." More laughter. Across the ballroom, several women glanced toward Seo-jun before quickly pretending they hadn't. It wasn't difficult to understand why. He carried himself with effortless confidence, not arrogance, but the quiet certainty of someone accustomed to succeeding. Business, sports, academics, relationships. Life had rarely told Kang Seo-jun no. One of his friends leaned closer. "So?" Seo-jun raised an eyebrow. "So? You remember Naomi Brooks?" The name landed softly. "Almost forgotten." "Almost." Seo-jun frowned slightly. "Naomi." His brow furrowed. "I'm trying to remember." "The scholarship student. Photography club. The Nigerian girl." Realization slowly dawned. "Oh, I remember. Quiet. Always carrying a camera." His friend laughed. "Quiet? That's all you remember?" Seo-jun shrugged. "It was 10 years ago." Another classmate rolled his eyes dramatically. "She practically worshipped you." The circle erupted into teasing whistles. "She never missed one of your basketball games." "Remember graduation?" "She volunteered to photograph every sports award ceremony." Looking back, I don't think she was photographing the trophies. More laughter. Seo-jun chuckled politely. "I honestly had no idea." His friend pointed toward the far side of the ballroom. "Well, you can apologize now." Seo-jun followed his finger. Standing beside one of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Seoul skyline was a woman in an elegant emerald green evening dress. She wasn't trying to draw attention, yet attention found her anyway. Her natural curls framed her face beautifully. Diamond earrings shimmered beneath the ballroom lights. A professional camera rested inside a leather case beside her chair, almost as though it were simply another part of her. She stood quietly speaking with an elderly professor from their former school, smiling warmly as he laughed at something she had said. She looked different, not because she had changed beyond recognition, but because she carried herself with a confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was. She no longer looked like the shy girl hiding behind a camera. She looked like someone who had stepped fully into her own life. "That's Naomi?" Seo-jun asked. His classmates exchanged amused glances. "You sound surprised." "I am." One friend smirked. "Go say hello." Another added mischievously, "Who knows? Maybe she's still waiting for you." The group laughed again. Seo-jun smiled. "I'm just introducing myself to an old classmate." "Sure you are. That's what they all say." Straightening his jacket, Seo-jun picked up a glass of sparkling water and made his way across the ballroom. Several conversations paused as people noticed where he was heading. Even the former teachers exchanged knowing smiles. Some remembered the quiet black girl who had admired Kang Seo-jun from afar. Perhaps tonight would finally close that unfinished chapter. Naomi sensed someone approaching before she turned. She excused herself from the professor with a gentle smile. As she faced him, their eyes met for the first time in 10 years. Seo-jun smiled politely. "Naomi Brooks?" "Yes. It's been a long time." There was a brief silence. Naomi studied his face, not for 1 second, not for 2, long enough that people nearby began watching. She tilted her head ever so slightly. Her expression remained calm, courteous, respectful. Then she offered a small, apologetic smile. "I'm sorry." A heartbeat passed. "Have we met before?" The smile froze on Kang Seo-jun's face. The glass in his hand stopped halfway to his lips. Around them, laughter faded. Conversations slowed. Even the pianist seemed to miss a note. Several classmates stared in open disbelief. Someone whispered, "Did she just—" Another murmured, "No way." For the first time since anyone could remember, Kang Seo-jun had absolutely no idea what to say. And Naomi Brooks, the woman who had once known the rhythm of his footsteps better than her own heartbeat, looked at him as though he were a complete stranger. The silence that followed Naomi's question seemed to stretch across the entire ballroom. Kang Seo-jun stood motionless, the polite smile on his face slowly fading into bewilderment. For the first time in years, the man who always had the right words found himself speechless. "Have we met before?" The words echoed in his mind. Around them, conversations resumed in hushed whispers. A few classmates exchanged awkward glances. Others pretended not to stare, though every eye in the room was secretly fixed on them. Naomi remained composed. Her posture was relaxed, her expression courteous, as if she had genuinely asked an innocent question. Seo-jun forced a small laugh. Kang Seo-jun." He extended his hand. "We were classmates at Seoul International High School." Naomi's eyes widened slightly in what appeared to be recognition. "Oh," she nodded politely. "Please forgive me. I meet so many people through work these days." She shook his hand briefly. "It's nice to see you again, Mr. Kang." Mr. Kang. Not Seo-jun. Not even classmate. Just Mr. Kang. The formality stung far more than he cared to admit. I heard you've become the CEO of Carteron Tech, Naomi continued with a warm professional smile. Congratulations. That's an incredible achievement. Thank you. And congratulations to you as well. He glanced at the leather camera case resting beside her chair. I hear your photography has received international recognition. A flicker of surprise crossed Naomi's face. You know about that? I heard from our classmates. She smiled. Thank you. An uncomfortable silence settled between them. It wasn't hostile. It was simply empty. There were no shared memories, no laughter, no nostalgic stories, just two adults exchanging polite conversation. Finally, Naomi glanced toward the stage where the host was preparing to begin the reunion program. I should find my seat. It was nice seeing you again. Before Seo-jun could respond, she gave a courteous bow and walked away. He watched her disappear into the crowd. His friends wasted no time surrounding him. So? One of them burst into laughter. That didn't go as planned. Another slapped him gently on the shoulder. I've never seen anyone forget Kang Seo-jun. I'm not convinced she forgot. Another classmate said quietly. Seo-jun turned. What do you mean? The man shrugged. I think she remembered. But if she remembered... He hesitated. Then why pretend? No one answered, because no one knew. Naomi found her assigned seat near the front of the ballroom. She let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You handled that well. The familiar voice belonged to her closest friend, Amina Okafor, another Nigerian who had moved to Seoul years earlier, now a successful architect. Amina had been one of the few people who knew everything. The crush, the heartbreak, the years Naomi spent convincing herself to move on. Amina leaned closer. You almost smiled. Naomi chuckled softly. I almost did. You recognized him immediately. Of course I did. You lied beautifully. Naomi stared toward the stage. I didn't lie. You asked if we'd met before. Amina raised an eyebrow. The version of me that knew Kang Seo-jun doesn't exist anymore. Amina reached for her hand. You've really forgiven him. There was never anything to forgive. He never promised me anything. He never rejected me. He simply never noticed me. Her voice carried no bitterness, only acceptance. Amina studied her friend's face. You still kept the yearbook. I keep lots of old things. The yearbook, the graduation program, the photography club badge, the cherry blossom photo. Naomi's smile disappeared. Some memories don't disappear. They just stop hurting. Across the ballroom, Seo-jun wasn't listening to the reunion speeches. His eyes kept drifting toward Naomi. She looked different from every memory he had. More confident, more graceful. He frowned. Why did it bother him so much that she hadn't remembered him? No, that wasn't true. What bothered him was the possibility that she had remembered him and simply didn't care. The applause around the ballroom startled him back to reality. The principal had finished speaking. Dinner was about to begin. Guests began moving toward the buffet tables. Seo-jun excused himself from his friends and walked toward one of the balconies overlooking the Han River. Need some air? He turned. Standing beside him was Park Ji-hoon, his best friend since high school. Ji-hoon leaned against the railing. You've been staring at Naomi all evening. Seo-jun didn't deny it. Was she really that quiet in school? Ji-hoon laughed. Quiet? She was practically invisible. Seo-jun frowned. I don't remember talking to her. You didn't. I don't remember seeing her much. You didn't. Ji-hoon looked at him knowingly. That's exactly the problem. Seo-jun rested both hands on the railing. I honestly don't understand. Ji-hoon hesitated. You know, there was a rumor back then. What rumor? That Naomi had a crush on you. Seo-jun looked genuinely surprised. I never heard that. Ji-hoon smiled sadly. Because no one told you. She never told anyone. People just noticed. She always photographed your basketball games. She volunteered whenever your class needed pictures. She stayed behind after school if she knew you were practicing. Seo-jun's expression slowly changed. Seriously? Ji-hoon nodded. But after graduation, she disappeared. Someone said she moved abroad. Someone else heard she'd become a photographer. And now, he gestured toward the ballroom. Here she is. Successful, confident, and apparently unable to remember your name. Seo-jun shook his head slowly. It doesn't make sense. Ji-hoon smiled. It doesn't? You spent 4 years never noticing her. He looked back toward the ballroom where Naomi laughed at something their former literature teacher had said. Is simply life balancing the scales? Later that evening, as guests prepared to leave, Naomi thanked the organizing committee and walked toward the hotel entrance. Outside, the summer air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of traffic through downtown Seoul. She waited for her ride, scrolling through emails on her phone. Behind her, the revolving doors turned once more. Seo-jun stepped outside. He noticed her standing alone beneath the soft glow of the entrance lights. For a brief moment, he considered walking over. As if sensing his presence, Naomi looked up. Their eyes met again. She offered him the same polite smile. Not warm. Not cold. Simply courteous. Then a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. The driver hurried out and opened the rear door. Good evening, Miss Brooks. Thank you, Mr. Choi. Naomi climbed into the vehicle. Before the door closed, she glanced toward Seo-jun one last time. There was no anger in her eyes, no regret, no longing, only peace. The SUV merged into the traffic and disappeared into the glittering streets of Seoul. Seo-jun remained on the hotel steps long after it was gone. For reasons he couldn't explain, one thought refused to leave his mind. Did she truly forget me? Or did I spend 4 years overlooking someone unforgettable? He had no idea that this question would follow him far beyond the reunion. And that fate was about to place Naomi Brooks back into his life in a way neither of them could have imagined. The following Monday, the city was already alive. Office workers hurried through Gangnam Station with coffee in one hand and smartphones in the other. Buses sighed to a stop before disappearing into streams of traffic. For most people, the high school reunion had become another pleasant memory. For Kang Seo-jun, it had become an obsession. He sat alone in his office on the 43rd floor of JM Nexus Holdings, a technology company that had become one of South Korea's fastest-growing AI firms. On his desk lay 3 documents requiring his signature. His executive assistant had already reminded him twice. Yet Seo-jun hadn't read a single page. Instead, he stared absent-mindedly at a photograph on his tablet. It wasn't Naomi's picture. It was the group photo taken at the reunion. Everyone smiled at the camera. Everyone except him. He looked distracted, because the picture had been taken only minutes after Naomi Brooks had politely asked if they'd ever met. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. His assistant, Choi Yun-seo, stepped inside carrying a stack of folders. Good morning, sir. Morning. You have a board meeting in 20 minutes. I know. You also have dinner with the investors tonight. I know. She hesitated. And your mother called. Seo-jun sighed. I definitely know. Yoon-seo smiled. She asked if you finally decided to date someone. Seo-jun rubbed his forehead. She said she would gladly arrange introductions. I'll pass. She laughed quietly before placing another folder on his desk. This one is different. He looked up. The Seoul Arts Foundation is seeking a technology sponsor for an international photography exhibition. Photography? Yes. They're featuring award-winning photographers from more than 20 countries. She opened the folder. One of the featured artists is Naomi Brooks. Seo-jun looked up so quickly that his pen rolled across the desk. What? Yoon-seo blinked. You know her? He composed himself immediately. We went to high school together. I see. She slid the exhibition proposal toward him. Should I decline? His fingers rested lightly on the folder. For several seconds, he said nothing. Finally, no. We'll sponsor it. Across the city, Naomi Brooks stood on the rooftop of a renovated cultural center in Yongno district. She adjusted the lens of her camera. An elderly couple walked hand in hand. Click. A child chased pigeons across a courtyard. Click. Naomi smiled. This was why she loved photography. Not because of fame, not because of exhibitions, but because ordinary people often revealed extraordinary moments when they forgot they were being watched. Her phone vibrated. The caller ID read, Amina. Naomi answered with a smile. Good morning. You sound suspiciously happy. I've had coffee. I knew it. Naomi laughed. What's going on? You forgot. Forgot what? You promised to help me unpack. Naomi froze. Oh, you did forget. I'm sorry. You've officially become one of those busy artists. I'll be there. You'd better. And bring lunch. The call ended. Naomi glanced at her watch. She packed her equipment and headed downstairs. By early afternoon, a moving truck stood outside the luxurious Han River Heights residences. The 38-story apartment complex overlooked the river and was home to celebrities, executives, diplomats, and entrepreneurs. Amina stood with her hands on her hips, directing movers. Naomi laughed as she stepped out of the taxi. I see you've already started terrorizing them. Amina hugged her tightly. I missed you. You saw me 2 days ago. I still missed you. Naomi smiled. Where's your apartment? Penthouse level. Fancy. My company insisted. Poor you. They both laughed. The elevator carried them to the top floor. The doors opened onto a quiet hallway lined with only 4 apartments. Large windows overlooked the Han River. The corridor smelled faintly of fresh flowers. As they reached apartment PH3, Naomi noticed dozens of unopened boxes stacked outside the neighboring apartment. Furniture movers hurried in and out. Someone else was moving in. Amina unlocked her door. Ignore the mess. Naomi stepped inside. The apartment was beautiful, modern, bright, minimalist. The panoramic view stretched across nearly all of Seoul. This is incredible. I know. They spent the next 2 hours unpacking dishes, books, framed artwork, and kitchen supplies. Finally, I'm getting coffee. Amina pointed toward the hallway. The cafe downstairs makes amazing lattes. I'll come. No, you've done enough. Sit. Rest. Naomi surrendered. Fine. As soon as Amina disappeared, Naomi wandered onto the balcony. She raised her camera instinctively. Click. Beautiful. A sudden gust of wind swept across the balcony. One loose photograph slipped from the notebook she'd been carrying. Before she could grab it, the photograph floated over the dividing wall separating the neighboring balcony. Oh no! Naomi hurried toward the edge. The picture disappeared onto the balcony next door. She hesitated. Should she knock? Before she could decide, a man's voice came from the other side. I think this belongs to you. Naomi froze. That voice. Impossible. She slowly turned as the balcony divider door slid open. Standing there, holding her photograph carefully between two fingers, was Kang Seo-jun. He looked just as surprised. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Seo-jun looked from the photograph to Naomi and back again. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his lips. It seems... He lifted the photograph slightly. We've met before, after all. Naomi stared at him in complete disbelief. Of all the apartment buildings in Seoul, of all the penthouses, of all the neighbors fate could have chosen, it had chosen Kang Seo-jun. She accepted the photograph with a calm expression, though her heart had begun to race. Thank you. She turned to leave. Naomi. She stopped, but didn't turn around. I live next door now. I noticed. I guess we're neighbors. She nodded once. I guess we are. Then she walked back into her apartment and quietly closed the balcony door behind her. Seo-jun remained where he was, looking down at the photograph that had accidentally landed on his balcony moments earlier. Before returning it, he had noticed what it showed. A single cherry blossom tree. And beneath it, a teenage boy in a Seoul International High School basketball uniform. The boy was out of focus, almost hidden in the background. But Seo-jun recognized himself immediately. He looked toward the closed balcony door. A question formed in his mind. Was that photograph an accident? Or the first clue to a story he had never known? As the sun dipped lower over the Han River, neither of them realized that living next door would make avoiding each other impossible, and that every encounter would slowly uncover the truth buried beneath 10 years of silence. The first week of living next door was surprisingly uneventful. At least, that was what Naomi Brooks kept telling herself. She left her apartment every morning by 7:30, with her camera bag slung over one shoulder and a coffee tumbler in the other. Most days, she spent hours wandering the streets of Seoul, capturing ordinary moments that others overlooked. She loved stories, not the ones people told with words, the ones they revealed when they believed no one was watching. By the time she returned home in the evenings, she was usually too exhausted to think about anything else, especially not the man living next door. Unfortunately, life seemed determined to keep placing Kang Seo-jun in her path. One Thursday morning, Naomi stepped into the private elevator carrying 2 heavy camera bags. She pressed the button for the lobby. Just before the doors closed, a hand appeared between them. The doors slid open again. Kang Seo-jun stepped inside. For one brief second, they simply stared at each other. Then Naomi gave a polite nod. Good morning? Morning. The elevator began its quiet descent. Silence. The kind that wasn't awkward, yet wasn't comfortable either. Seo-jun noticed one of the camera bags slipping from Naomi's shoulder. May I? Before she could object, he steadied the strap. There. It looked like it was about to fall. Naomi adjusted the bag. Thank you. My pleasure. Silence returned. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Seo-jun cleared his throat. So, how's the photography exhibition coming? Naomi glanced at him, surprised. You know about it? Our company is sponsoring it. She blinked. I didn't realize. It was approved this week. Oh, another pause. I appreciate the support. It wasn't charity. She tilted her head. I've seen your work. It's impressive. Naomi looked genuinely puzzled. You've seen my work? He nodded. The proposal included several photographs. You have a remarkable eye. For the first time since the reunion, Naomi smiled. Not the polite smile she offered strangers. A real one. Small, brief, but unmistakably genuine. Thank you. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. She stepped out first. Have a good day, Mr. Kang. You too. He hesitated. Naomi. She looked back only long enough to nod. Then she disappeared into the morning crowd outside. Seo-jun watched the closing doors and realized something. That tiny smile had somehow felt like a greater victory than every compliment he'd received in years. Later that afternoon, Naomi's exhibition preparations brought her to the Seoul Arts Foundation. The spacious gallery buzzed with activity. Workers adjusted lighting. Curators arranged photographs. Designers debated wall colors. Naomi stood beside a large black and white portrait of an elderly woman laughing with tears in her eyes. The exhibition director approached. Beautiful. Naomi smiled. Thank you. There's one image everyone keeps stopping in front of. He pointed toward the far wall. Naomi followed his gaze. Her favorite photograph. It showed an elderly Korean man sitting alone at a bus stop during winter. Snow covered his shoulders. Yet he smiled gently while sharing roasted chestnuts with a little girl he had never met. There was warmth in the cold, hope in loneliness. People ask me why I chose that one, Naomi said quietly. And I tell them, because kindness is most beautiful when nobody expects recognition. The director nodded thoughtfully. I think that's why your work resonates. Meanwhile, across the river, Seo-jun sat through another executive meeting. Charts, budgets, investments, acquisitions. Normally, he thrived in meetings like this. Today, he couldn't focus. His friend and chief financial officer, Park Ji-hoon, noticed immediately. Earth to Seo-jun. No response. Ji-hoon closed his laptop. You've ignored 3 questions. The board members exchanged amused looks. Seo-jun blinked. I'm sorry. What was the question? Ji-hoon grinned. The real question is... He leaned back. Why are you smiling at absolutely nothing? I'm not. You are. I'm thinking. About quarterly revenue? No. Naomi? The room erupted with laughter. Seo-jun sighed. Can we continue the meeting? Ji-hoon folded his arms. Our CEO has finally met a woman who doesn't worship him. Another director chuckled. It's healthy. Seo-jun tried to hide his embarrassment. I am not interested because she ignored me. No? Ji-hoon smirked. Then why did you approve a sponsorship proposal without asking about the budget? Seo-jun paused. The room became even quieter. One elderly board member smiled knowingly. Sometimes, the best investments have nothing to do with money. Saturday arrived with brilliant sunshine. Naomi decided to spend the morning photographing the cherry blossoms lining Uedo Park. Couples spread picnic blankets beneath the trees. Naomi crouched near a flower bed, adjusting her camera settings. Perfect. She stood to change positions when she heard a familiar voice behind her. I had a feeling I'd find you behind a camera. She turned. Kang Seo-jun, dressed casually in a navy sweater and jeans instead of his usual business suit. He looked younger, more approachable. What are you doing here? She asked. I go running here on Saturdays. He held up a bottle of water. I promise I'm not following you. Naomi laughed before she could stop herself. I wasn't going to accuse you. I'm relieved. Another brief silence settled between them. This one felt different, less guarded. Seo-jun looked around at the crowds. I've walked through this park hundreds of times. Naomi adjusted her lens. And? I've never noticed half the things you photograph. She raised the camera and pointed toward a little boy, carefully placing fallen cherry blossoms into his grandmother's handbag. Most people look. She pressed the shutter. Click. I try to see. Seo-jun followed her gaze. The grandmother laughed as the little boy proudly zipped the bag closed. It was such a small moment, one he would have walked past without a second thought. Naomi lowered her camera. You know what's interesting? What? The world rarely changes. She smiled softly. Our attention does. For reasons he couldn't explain, those words stayed with him long after they left the park. As they walked toward the cafe across the street, neither of them noticed a photographer from a business magazine raising his camera. The shutter clicked. Once, twice, 3 times. Capturing Seoul's most eligible CEO walking beside the internationally acclaimed photographer Naomi Brooks. By Monday morning, those photographs would be circulating online, and someone from Seo-jun's past would decide it was the perfect opportunity to step back into his life, setting in motion a misunderstanding that neither he nor Naomi saw coming. 3 days passed. 3 days of pretending the person living next door didn't exist. Naomi was determined to keep it that way. It wasn't difficult. She had spent 10 years learning how to keep old memories exactly where they belonged. In the past. Unfortunately, Kang Seo-jun had apparently decided that coincidence was no longer enough. Or perhaps fate simply had a twisted sense of humor. Friday evening arrived with heavy rain. Naomi stepped out of the elevator carrying 2 large grocery bags. She had spent the afternoon preparing for the weekend. Fresh vegetables, salmon, fruit, coffee beans imported from Ethiopia, a loaf of warm sourdough from her favorite bakery. She smiled to herself. Cooking had become her therapy whenever deadlines piled up. Just as she reached her apartment door, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then darkness. The hallway fell completely silent. A collective groan echoed from somewhere below as the emergency generators slowly powered on. Dim emergency lights cast the corridor in a soft amber glow. Naomi sighed. Perfect timing. She searched her handbag for her phone. Nothing. Her brows knitted together. No. She checked the grocery bags. Nothing. I left it in the taxi. Before panic could settle in, a familiar voice spoke behind her. Looks like we're both having a bad evening. She turned. Kang Seo-jun stood a few feet away, holding an umbrella in one hand and a paper bag in the other. His tie was loosened, and rainwater still clung to the shoulders of his navy coat. You forgot your phone too? He asked. No. My phone. She laughed softly. I left it in a taxi. That's unfortunate. It'll probably turn up. I hope so. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The emergency lights hummed quietly overhead. Seo-jun glanced at the grocery bags. Need help? I'm fine. One of the paper bags suddenly split open. Oranges rolled across the polished marble floor in every direction. Oh! Naomi crouched immediately. So much for being fine. Seo-jun couldn't help smiling as he knelt beside her. One orange rolled almost to the elevator. He retrieved it before it disappeared inside. Another rolled toward the stairwell. He caught that one too. Within moments, they had gathered everything. Naomi looked at the torn bag and laughed. I guess the universe is trying to humble me. I know the feeling. She looked up. For the first time since the reunion, they both laughed. Not politely, not awkwardly, just naturally. The emergency power wasn't enough to restart the apartment doors. Residents would have to wait until maintenance restored the system. A security guard approached them apologetically. We're very sorry. The electronic lock should be working again within 40 minutes. Naomi looked at the bags in her hands. 40 minutes? I'm afraid so. The guard bowed before moving on. Seo-jun looked toward the lounge at the end of the hallway. They've lit candles. Naomi followed his gaze. The residence lounge overlooked the Han River through enormous windows. Without the usual bright lighting, it looked strangely peaceful. Would you like to wait there? She hesitated. Every sensible instinct told her to decline. Then thunder shook the building. Rain lashed harder against the windows. She glanced at the heavy grocery bags. All right. The lounge was nearly empty. Only an elderly couple occupied one corner, quietly playing chess beneath candlelight. Naomi and Seo-jun chose seats near the windows. Neither seemed eager to break the silence. Eventually, Seo-jun spoke. I saw your name on the Seoul Arts Foundation exhibition. Naomi looked surprised. You did? My company became one of the sponsors. Oh. She smiled politely. Thank you. I didn't sponsor it because of you. I assumed not. I sponsored it because it looked worthwhile. I believe you. He smiled. I'm glad. Another silence settled between them. This one wasn't uncomfortable, just careful. Finally, Seo-jun asked, Can I ask you something? You just did, he chuckled. The reunion. Naomi looked out at the rain. I wondered when we'd get there. Did you really not recognize me? She was quiet for several seconds. Then, what answer would satisfy you? The truth. She turned toward him. I recognized your face. He blinked. But I didn't recognize the person standing in front of me. He frowned slightly. I don't understand. The Kang Seo-jun I knew existed 10 years ago. You aren't 18 anymore. Neither am I. She folded her hands in her lap. People change. I've changed. So have you. I don't know this version of you. Her words were calm, not accusing, simply honest. Seo-jun looked down. I suppose that's fair. The rain continued relentlessly. Naomi noticed him staring at the river. You like the view? I grew up looking at it. My parents lived nearby. I used to think the river never changed. He smiled faintly. Now I realize it changes every second. Naomi looked at him. That's a photographer's observation. Maybe I've been talking to photographers. She laughed. I've rubbed off on you already? Maybe. For the first time, she noticed something she hadn't expected. When Seo-jun wasn't trying to impress anyone, he was actually easy to talk to. A loud growl interrupted the conversation. Naomi froze. Seo-jun looked around. Was that my stomach? He burst into laughter. She covered her face. This is embarrassing. You skipped dinner. I was planning to cook. He lifted the paper bag he'd carried inside. I was planning to eat convenience store kimbap. Naomi stared. The great CEO eats convenience store food? Frequently. I don't believe you. It's true, she laughed. I imagined private chefs. I fired one. Why? He judged my instant noodles. Naomi laughed so hard she had to wipe a tear from the corner of her eye. You can't be serious. I am. I like noodles. So do I. See? We finally agree on something. Just then, the lights returned. The lounge brightened. The elevators hummed back to life. A voice came over the building speakers. Power has been restored. Residents applauded softly. Naomi stood. Looks like we're free. So we are. They walked back toward their apartments together. As Naomi unlocked her door, she looked down at the groceries. Then, at Seo-jun's lonely paper bag. She hesitated. This was dangerous. Not because she feared him, because she feared how easy this conversation had felt. Still, good manners won. I bought enough food for several people. Seo-jun looked at her. If you're comfortable. She cleared her throat. I could cook. He blinked. You mean dinner? As neighbors. Nothing more. His smile was genuine. I'd like that. 40 minutes later, the aroma of garlic, butter, herbs, and grilled salmon filled Naomi's apartment. Seo-jun stood awkwardly in the kitchen doorway. Can I help? You can set the table. I can do that. Can you? I hope so. She laughed again. As he arranged the plates, his eyes wandered across the apartment. Unlike his minimalist home, next door, Naomi's space felt lived in. Books lined the shelves. Framed photographs covered one wall. Travel souvenirs sat beside potted plants. There was warmth everywhere. One photograph caught his attention. It showed an elderly Korean woman smiling brightly while holding Naomi's hand. Who's this? Naomi glanced over. My host grandmother. You had a host family? She nodded. They treated me like their own granddaughter. She passed away 2 years ago. I'm sorry. So am I. There was a tenderness in Naomi's voice that made Seo-jun realize something. He knew almost nothing about the woman who had once quietly admired him, and suddenly, he wanted to know everything. Outside, the rain continued to fall over Seoul. Inside, apartment PH3, 2 former classmates shared their first meal together. Neither of them noticed that the walls between strangers had begun, ever so slightly, to crack. Dinner should have ended an hour ago. The grilled salmon was gone. The roasted vegetables had disappeared. Even the sourdough Naomi had insisted was just something she picked up on the way home had been reduced to a few crumbs. Yet neither she nor Kang Seo-jun seemed eager to end the evening. A soft jazz playlist drifted from a speaker on the bookshelf. For the first time in years, Seo-jun wasn't thinking about quarterly reports, investors, or tomorrow's board meeting. He was listening, really listening. So that's why I chose documentary photography, Naomi said, pouring hot tea into 2 ceramic cups. My professor used to say that portraits capture faces. She smiled. But documentaries capture souls. Seo-jun accepted the cup with both hands. I've never thought about photography that way. Most people don't. They think photography is about beautiful places. She shook her head. It's really about honest moments. He looked around the apartment again. Now he understood why it felt different. Nothing here had been arranged to impress visitors. Every photograph on the wall carried a story. An old fisherman, smiling, despite empty nets. A little girl chasing bubbles in Lagos. A young mother sleeping upright on a hospital chair while holding her baby's tiny hand. Life, unfiltered. As they cleared the dishes together, Seo-jun reached for 2 empty plates. I'll wash these. Naomi laughed. You're a guest. I'm also capable of washing dishes. We'll see. She handed him an apron. It was pale yellow. Across the front were embroidered words, Life happens. Wash the dishes. Anyway, Seo-jun stared at it. You planned this. I absolutely did. You own 1 apron. I own 3. And this is the embarrassing one. It is. He sighed dramatically before putting it on. Naomi burst into laughter. You should take a picture. Don't tempt me. I'll delete your camera. They laughed together. For a brief moment, it felt natural, almost effortless. Halfway through washing the dishes, the kitchen faucet suddenly sputtered, then stopped. Seo-jun frowned. Did I break it? Naomi walked over. You've been here less than 2 hours. That's enough time. She twisted the handle. Nothing. A notification buzzed on her smartwatch. Building maintenance. Water supply temporarily suspended on penthouse level for emergency repairs. Estimated time, 30 minutes. She sighed. Well, there goes the cleanup. Seo-jun dried his hands. I'll help once it's back. You don't have to. I know. But I want to. She studied him for a moment. There was no trace of the overly confident man everyone had described at the reunion. He wasn't trying to impress her. He simply meant what he said. With nothing else to do, Naomi walked toward the bookshelf. I have something to show you. She pulled out a large linen-covered album. My first exhibition. Seo-jun sat beside her on the sofa. The pages revealed photographs from around the world. Children playing soccer on dusty roads. Monks walking through morning mist. Each image seemed alive. They're incredible. Thank you. She turned another page, then another. Then, something slipped free from between 2 pages. A photograph fluttered silently onto the floor. Naomi's heart stopped. No, not that one. She reached for it immediately. Too late. Seo-jun bent down first. I've got... His voice trailed off. The photograph wasn't part of her exhibition. It was old, faded, printed on glossy paper that had yellowed with time. It showed the cherry blossom courtyard of Seoul International High School. Students filled the frame. Near the center stood a teenage Kang Seo-jun in his basketball uniform. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was laughing with his teammates. Whoever had taken the picture clearly wasn't photographing him. He simply happened to be the subject. On the back, someone had written in neat blue ink, Spring, 3rd year. Seo-jun looked up slowly. You took this? Naomi swallowed. Yes. You kept it. Silence. She gently took the photograph from his hand. I forgot it was in there. He watched her carefully. You've carried this for 10 years? She looked down at the faded image. No. I carried it for 4. And then, she smiled faintly, it became just another photograph. Seo-jun wasn't convinced. Was it? She met his eyes. What answer are you hoping for? The honest one. Naomi inhaled slowly. The honest answer. She rested the photograph on the coffee table. Is that I couldn't throw it away. Neither of them spoke. Seo-jun broke the silence. Ji-hoon told me. She looked at him. He said, you liked me. A sad little smile touched Naomi's lips. People in high school notice everything. Was it true? She looked out toward the river. What difference would the answer make now? It matters to me. She thought for several seconds, then nodded once. Yes, I liked you. Very much. The words landed softly, without drama, without embarrassment, as though she were speaking about another lifetime. Seo-jun stared at her. You never told me. You never looked. The sentence wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was simply true. His shoulders lowered. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I should apologize. For what? For not noticing. Naomi smiled gently. You make it sound like you committed a crime. I hurt you. You didn't. You ignored me. You didn't even know I was waiting. She looked directly into his eyes. You can't blame someone for failing to answer a question they never heard. Those words struck him harder than any accusation could have. The apartment fell quiet again. Finally, Naomi stood. I think it's getting late. Seo-jun nodded. You're right. He walked toward the door but paused before leaving. Naomi. Yes? I'm glad. He searched for the right words. You didn't throw the photograph away. She smiled softly. So am I. He stepped into the hallway. As the door closed behind him, he remained standing there for several seconds, staring at the wood grain without really seeing it. Inside his apartment, he walked straight to his bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of his dresser, and pulled out an old cardboard box he hadn't touched in years. Inside were high school keepsakes, his graduation ribbon, a basketball medal, old notebooks, and his senior yearbook. He sat on the floor and slowly turned the pages. For the first time, he wasn't looking for pictures of himself. He was looking for Naomi Brooks. There she was, third row, always near the edge of group photos, usually holding a camera instead of smiling at one. He frowned. How had he never really seen her? Then something caught his attention. On the final page, where classmates had written farewell messages, he found a small note in delicate handwriting. There was no signature, just one sentence. I hope one day someone sees you the way I do. His heartbeat quickened. He traced the faded ink with his fingertips. Deep down, he already knew who had written it. And for the first time since the reunion, Kang Seo-jun wasn't wondering why Naomi had pretended to forget him. He was wondering something far more painful. How much of her quiet love had he completely missed while they were standing in the same hallways every single day? The following morning, Kang Seo-jun canceled something he had never canceled before: his Saturday golf game. Park Ji-hoon nearly dropped his phone when he received the text. Seo-jun, can't make it today. Ji-hoon immediately called. You have a fever? No. Food poisoning? No. Then what's wrong? Nothing. There was a suspicious pause. You're thinking about Naomi Brooks again, aren't you? Seo-jun leaned back in his chair, staring out at the Han River through the windows of his apartment. Maybe. Ji-hoon laughed so loudly that Seo-jun had to pull the phone away from his ear. The legendary Kang Seo-jun has finally met a woman who keeps him awake at night. It's not like that. It never is. I mean it. So do I. Seo-jun sighed. I'll call you later. He hung up before Ji-hoon could continue teasing him. The apartment fell silent once again. His eyes drifted toward the yearbook lying open on his coffee table. He had barely slept. Every few hours, he found himself flipping through its pages, stopping whenever Naomi appeared in another photograph. She was always there. At school festivals, volunteer events, photography club, graduation, always standing slightly behind everyone else. Camera around her neck. Smile small but genuine. How had he missed her? No. The better question was why he had never looked. Across the hallway, Naomi Brooks was already dressed for work. She adjusted the strap of her camera bag before checking today's schedule. A full day, just the way she liked it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Amina. Amina, lunch today? Naomi, can't. Exhibition. Amina, still avoiding your handsome neighbor? Naomi smiled. Naomi, I'm not avoiding him. The reply came instantly. Amina, you're answering too quickly. Naomi laughed. She slipped her phone into her bag and stepped into the hallway. At exactly the same moment, the neighboring apartment door opened. She stopped. Seo-jun looked equally surprised. Oh. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." For a second, they simply stood there. Then he noticed the heavy equipment slung over her shoulders. "Big day?" "My exhibition opens next week." "You've been working on it?" "For almost a year." He nodded. "I hope it goes well." "Thank you." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. They stepped inside together. Neither pressed the button immediately. They both reached for it at the same time. Their fingers brushed. Naomi quickly withdrew her hand. "You first." "No, you." She smiled. "We're doing this?" He chuckled. "You started it." "I absolutely did." For the first time since becoming neighbors, the elevator ride wasn't awkward. When the doors opened in the lobby, Naomi headed toward the entrance. She barely noticed the elderly woman struggling with several shopping bags. One bag suddenly tore. Apples rolled across the marble floor. Without hesitation, Naomi hurried over. "Oh, please don't worry." She knelt immediately, gathering the fruit before anyone stepped on it. "I've got them." The elderly woman smiled gratefully. "Thank you, dear." Seo-jun silently joined her. Within seconds, the apples had all been collected. Naomi carefully transferred them into another reusable bag she happened to have inside her camera backpack. "There. That should hold." The elderly woman looked at both of them with kind eyes. "You two make a lovely couple." Naomi nearly dropped an apple. "We're not. We're neighbors," Seo-jun explained politely. The woman smiled knowingly. "So were my husband and I." She winked before walking away. Naomi covered her face. "Well, that wasn't embarrassing." Seo-jun laughed. "I've been through worse." She looked at him. "I doubt that." "You forgetting me at the reunion." Naomi blinked. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. A real laugh. Bright, unrestrained. "I suppose you have a point." He smiled. It was worth the embarrassment just to hear that laugh. Later that afternoon, Seo-jun arrived at JM Nexus Holdings. His assistant, Choi Yun-seo, followed him into the conference room. "The board members are waiting." He nodded. As the meeting began, executives launched into presentations about revenue forecasts, overseas expansion, and artificial intelligence investments. Normally, Seo-jun dominated discussions. Today, his attention wandered. One slide featured a proposal to sponsor cultural education programs. Without thinking, he interrupted. "What about community art?" The room fell silent. The marketing director blinked. "Art, sir." "Photography." The director shuffled through his notes. "We haven't considered that sector." "We should." Another executive spoke carefully. "May I ask why?" Seo-jun paused. Because someone had once taught him that photographs captured souls. Instead, he answered, "Technology shouldn't only solve problems. It should preserve humanity." Several board members exchanged impressed looks. Yun-seo quietly smiled to herself. Something about her boss had changed. He listened more, interrupted less, asked different questions. He seemed lighter. That evening, Naomi arrived at the Seoul Arts Foundation Gallery. Workers were hanging the final pieces for the exhibition. She walked slowly through the spacious white hall. Each photograph represented a chapter of her journey. Her mentor, Professor Kim Sung-ho, approached with 2 cups of coffee. "Nervous?" "A little." "You shouldn't be." He handed her a cup. "These photographs are honest. People respond to honesty." She smiled. "I hope so." Professor Kim looked around the gallery. "Do you know what your greatest strength is?" Naomi shook her head. "You never photograph people from above." She frowned slightly. What do you mean? You always kneel. You lower yourself to their eye level. Children, elderly people, homeless people, everyone. He smiled warmly. You respect your subjects. Naomi looked at one of her photographs in silence. She had never realized she did that. Maybe, Professor Kim continued, that's why people trust you. That night, Seo-jun returned home later than usual. As he stepped out of the elevator, he noticed movement near Naomi's apartment. She was sitting on the floor outside her door. Camera bags surrounded her. She looked frustrated. He walked over. Everything okay? She looked up with a tired smile. I left my apartment key inside. He glanced at the closed door. Locked out? Yes. I've already called building management. They said someone will be here in 20 minutes. He nodded. Mind if I keep you company? You don't have to. I know. But 20 minutes is a long time. She hesitated, then patted the floor beside her. Suit yourself. He sat down. For a while, they simply watched the city lights through the hallway windows. Neither felt the need to fill the silence. After several minutes, Seo-jun spoke quietly. Naomi. I've been thinking. She smiled without looking at him. That sounds dangerous. He laughed softly. It usually is. Then his expression grew serious. I owe you an apology. She turned toward him. For what? For spending 4 years seeing everyone. He looked down at his hands. Except you? Naomi was quiet. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. You can't change the past, Seo-jun. It was the first time she had called him by his first name. Neither of them seemed to notice. But, she continued, you can decide how you see people today. Building management arrived just then, interrupting the moment. The technician unlocked Naomi's apartment. She stood, gathering her camera bags. Before going inside, she looked back at Seo-jun. Thank you for keeping me company. He smiled. Anytime. She disappeared into her apartment. The door closed softly behind her. Seo-jun remained in the hallway for another moment. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to win someone's attention. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply wanted to become someone worthy of Naomi Brooks' quiet respect. And although neither of them realized it yet, that small change in his heart was the beginning of something far more enduring than attraction. It was the beginning of love. A week later, the Seoul Arts Foundation buzzed with anticipation. Tonight was the official opening of Through Her Eyes, Naomi Brooks' first solo exhibition in South Korea. By 6 o'clock, the gallery was overflowing. Business leaders, artists, journalists, television crews, social media influencers, collectors from Japan, Singapore, France, and the United States. Soft piano music floated through the spacious gallery as guests admired nearly 80 photographs displayed beneath warm spotlights. Each photograph carried a simple title: Hope, Home, Waiting, Grace. There were no lengthy descriptions. Naomi believed photographs should speak before words ever could. She stood near the entrance wearing a cream-colored evening gown with delicate pearl earrings. Her natural curls were gathered into an elegant updo, revealing the quiet confidence in her smile. She greeted guests one after another. Welcome. I'm so glad you came. Thank you for supporting the exhibition. Across the room, Professor Kim watched proudly. You've become everything I hoped you would. Naomi smiled. I still have a lot to learn. Good. The day an artist believes they've learned everything, they stop seeing. Outside the gallery, a sleek black Genesis sedan came to a stop. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Kang Seojun adjusted the cuffs of his tailored black tuxedo before stepping onto the red carpet. Camera flashes exploded immediately. "Mr. Kang! This way! One photo!" "Congratulations on sponsoring the exhibition." He smiled politely without stopping. Tonight wasn't about him. Inside the gallery, Choi Yun-seo caught sight of him first. "You made it. I said I would." She lowered her voice. "She's been nervous all day." Seo-jun glanced across the gallery. His eyes found Naomi almost instantly. She looked radiant, not because of the elegant dress, because she belonged here. This was her world, and she fit into it beautifully. Naomi sensed someone watching her. She turned. Their eyes met from opposite ends of the gallery. For a brief second, everything else faded into the background. She walked toward him. "I'm surprised you came. I promised I would. You also have a reputation for being busy." "I canceled another event." "You did. I wanted to be here." Her smile softened. "Thank you." Before either could say another word, the master of ceremonies approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's exhibition." Polite applause filled the room. The curator continued. "This exhibition would not have been possible without the generous support of JM Nexus Holdings and its CEO." He gestured toward Seojun. "Mr. Kang Seojun." Another round of applause. Seojun looked uncomfortable. He preferred standing behind successful people, not in front of them. The curator wasn't finished. "And of course, our extraordinary artist, Ms. Naomi Brooks." The applause grew even louder. Naomi stepped onto the small stage beside him. For the first time that evening, they stood side by side before hundreds of people. Near the back of the gallery, someone wasn't smiling. Kim Soo-jin folded her arms tightly. She had been one of the most popular girls in high school. Beautiful, wealthy, confident. She had dated Seojun briefly during their senior year. Now she watched Naomi and Seojun standing together beneath the lights. Her expression hardened. "So," she muttered, "that's the famous Naomi Brooks." A former classmate standing beside her nodded. "They've become neighbors." "I heard. They've also been seen together several times." Soo-jin's smile turned icy. "Interesting." After the opening speech, guests spread throughout the gallery again. Seojun wandered from photograph to photograph. Each image made him stop longer than he expected. One showed an elderly Korean fisherman repairing a torn net beneath a gray sky. Another captured a little Nigerian boy helping his younger sister learn to read. There were no celebrities, no luxury, no extravagance, only ordinary people. Yet every photograph felt extraordinary. Naomi joined him. "You've been standing in front of this one for 5 minutes." He smiled. "I didn't notice. It's my favorite." "The fisherman?" She nodded. "He lost his wife 2 years before I met him. He still went to the harbor every morning. Not because he needed money, but because they had promised each other they'd watch every sunrise together." Seojun stared at the photograph again. "I never would have guessed. That's why I love photographs. They let people tell stories without speaking." A sudden voice interrupted them. "Seojun!" They both turned. Kim Soo-jin approached gracefully in an elegant red gown. Her smile was flawless. "How long has it been?" Seojun bowed politely. "Soo-jin, it's good to see you." She laughed. "Still so formal." Then her eyes shifted toward Naomi. "You must be Naomi Brooks. I've heard so much about you." Naomi smiled courteously. It's nice to meet you. Oh, we've met before. Naomi searched her memory. High school. I was 2 years ahead of you. Recognition slowly dawned. I remember. Sujin's smile widened. I wondered if you would. Her gaze drifted toward Seojun. We were together once. I know. Naomi answered calmly. You made a lovely couple. The response caught Sujin off guard. She had expected jealousy. There was none. Only sincerity. For the next several minutes, Sujin dominated the conversation. She laughed loudly at Seojun's jokes, touched his arm whenever she spoke. Naomi quietly excused herself to greet arriving guests. She had work to do. Across the room, Amina noticed everything. She walked over. You okay? I'm fine. You don't look fine. Naomi watched Seojun speaking with Sujin. They have history. So do you. No. Naomi shook her head. They have memories. I had imagination. Amina frowned. Don't do that. I'm not. I'm simply telling the truth. Still, a tiny ache settled somewhere deep inside her chest, one she thought had disappeared years ago. Seojun finally escaped the conversation nearly 20 minutes later. He searched the gallery until he found Naomi standing alone near one of the windows overlooking the Han River. I'm sorry. She looked at him. For what? I got trapped. She smiled. I noticed. He leaned beside her. She talks exactly the same as she did in high school. Naomi laughed softly. I wouldn't know. You didn't miss much. Silence settled comfortably between them. Then Naomi asked, Did you love her? The question surprised him. He answered honestly, I thought I did. And now? He looked toward the photographs surrounding them. I don't think I understood what love was back then. Naomi didn't reply, but somehow, his answer stayed with her. As the evening came to an end, the curator announced that every photograph displayed tonight had already received purchase offers. Several pieces had sparked a bidding war. Professor Kim embraced Naomi. You've done it. She looked around the gallery, overwhelmed. I can't believe it. You earned every bit of this. Across the room, Seojun watched her laugh through grateful tears as guests congratulated her. For the first time, he wasn't proud because his company had sponsored the exhibition. He was proud because Naomi Brooks had achieved something extraordinary through her own talent, compassion, and perseverance. And he realized something that unsettled him. He no longer admired her simply because she had once cared about him. He admired her because of the woman she had become. What neither of them noticed was Kim Soo-jin watching from the gallery entrance, her smile long gone. As she slipped into the night, one thought echoed in her mind. If Naomi Brooks thinks she'll have Kang Seojun now, she's mistaken. The quiet peace that had been growing between Naomi and Seojun was about to face its first real test. Enjoying the story so far? Drop a comment below telling us who you're rooting for, and don't forget to like this video. It helps more romance lovers like you find this channel. 3 days after the exhibition, Naomi Brooks' photographs were everywhere. Social media overflowed with visitors sharing their favorite photographs under the hashtag #through her eyes. One photograph, titled Home is a Person, had become especially popular. It showed an elderly Korean couple sitting quietly on a park bench. The husband wasn't looking at the camera. He was carefully wrapping his wife's scarf around her neck. Neither of them smiled. Yet the photograph radiated love. When a journalist asked Naomi why she had chosen that title, she answered simply, "Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's the person who makes you feel safe. The quote spread across the internet within hours. Ironically, the one person who couldn't stop thinking about those words lived next door. Kang Seo-jun stared at the article on his office computer. He wasn't reading it anymore. He had memorized every line. A knock sounded on his office door. "Come in." His assistant, Choi Yun-seo, entered carrying a tablet. "Sir, your 2 o'clock meeting is ready." He looked up. "What meeting?" She blinked. "The merger meeting. The one you've been preparing for 6 months." "Oh." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Right." She narrowed her eyes. "You've never forgotten a meeting before." "I'm distracted." "I noticed." "May I say something, sir?" He nodded. "I've worked for you for 5 years. You've negotiated billion-dollar contracts without blinking. You've convinced impossible clients. You've solved crises that would have broken most companies." She smiled knowingly. "But one photographer has completely defeated you." Seo-jun laughed quietly. "You make it sound ridiculous." "It is." He leaned back in his chair. "I don't know what's happening to me." "No." Yun-seo corrected gently. "I think you do." That evening, Seo-jun left the office earlier than usual. Instead of heading home immediately, he drove toward the Han River. He parked near Banpo Bridge and walked alone along the riverside. Families rode bicycles. Children chased one another across the grass. Couples sat quietly watching the sunset paint the water in shades of orange and gold. He slipped his hands into his pockets. For years, he had believed love happened quickly. A glance, a spark, a confession, a relationship. That had been the pattern. Simple, predictable. But Naomi had changed everything. She never chased him, never flirted, never tried to impress him. In fact, she often seemed perfectly content without him. Strangely, that didn't push him away. It made him want to know her more. Not because she was difficult to win, because every conversation revealed another part of her heart, her kindness, her patience, her quiet strength. For the first time in his life, he wasn't trying to make someone fall for him. He simply hoped she would let him stay in her life. The realization stopped him in his tracks. A slow smile spread across his face. "Oh," he whispered to himself, "I'm in love." The words felt terrifying and freeing. The following Saturday, Naomi attended a community photography workshop she organized once every month. Instead of professionals, her students were children from different backgrounds living in Seoul. Some were Korean, some were international students. Others were children of immigrant families. Naomi believed every child deserved to tell their own story. "Remember," she said, kneeling to speak at eye level, "a camera isn't just for taking pictures. It's for listening." One little boy frowned. "How can a camera listen?" Naomi smiled. "It listens through you. If you care about someone, you'll notice things other people miss." The children nodded thoughtfully. Just then, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "I hope I'm not interrupting." She turned. Seo-jun stood at the entrance carrying 2 large boxes. Coffee, juice, pastries. The children gasped excitedly. "You brought snacks?" He smiled. "I heard photographers get hungry." The children rushed toward him. Naomi folded her arms. "I didn't know you were coming. I asked Professor Kim if volunteers were allowed." "You volunteered?" "I did." She looked genuinely surprised. "The CEO of JM Nexus is spending his Saturday with children?" He shrugged. "I had nothing more important to do." Professor Kim walked over with a satisfied smile. "I approved him." Naomi looked at her mentor. "You planned this. I merely accepted free help. Within minutes, Seo-jun found himself surrounded by children. A little girl handed him a tiny pink camera. Can you help me? I've never used one before. I've never used this one either. She giggled. We'll learn together. Naomi watched from a distance. She expected him to become impatient. He didn't. She expected him to leave after 15 minutes. He stayed. She expected him to check his phone constantly. He barely looked at it. Instead, he crouched beside every child, listened carefully, praised every photograph, even the blurry ones, especially the blurry ones. One little boy tugged on Naomi's sleeve. Teacher. Yes? Is that your husband? Naomi nearly choked on her water. What? The boy pointed confidently. The tall man. You smile differently when he's here. Several children nodded in agreement. Naomi looked toward Seo-jun. He was laughing after one little girl had accidentally photographed only his shoes. She quickly looked away. She searched for the right word. My neighbor. The children exchanged skeptical looks. Children had a remarkable ability to notice what adults tried to hide. By late afternoon, the workshop ended. Parents collected their children one by one. Professor Kim approached Naomi. I'll finish cleaning up. You two should go. We're fine. He smiled knowingly. I wasn't asking. Before either could protest, he disappeared inside the building. Naomi laughed. He's impossible. I like him. So do I. They began walking slowly toward the nearby park. The air smelled of freshly cut grass after the morning rain. Neither seemed in a hurry. After several minutes, Seo-jun stopped walking. Naomi. She turned. His expression was more serious than she'd ever seen. I've spent the last week trying to understand something. She waited quietly. I thought I admired you because of what happened in high school. He shook his head. I was wrong. He took a slow breath. I admire the woman you've become. The way you treat people. The way you notice everyone. The way you never make kindness look like a performance. Naomi's heartbeat quickened. He continued. I used to think confidence meant having all the right answers. She noticed his hands trembling slightly. But around you, I've learned it's okay not to. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, just full. He met her eyes. I'm not asking you for anything today. I'm not asking you to forgive the boy I was. I'm not asking you to return feelings you may no longer have. He smiled gently. I only want to be honest. Naomi held her breath. Kang Seo-jun. No. He interrupted softly. Just Seo-jun. He looked at her with complete sincerity. I like you. Not because you once liked me. Not because you challenged my pride. But because every day I spend with you, I discover another reason to respect you. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Finally, she smiled. A small, beautiful smile. Thank you, she said quietly, for telling me the truth. His heart sank slightly. There was no rejection, but there was no acceptance either. She stepped closer. So let me be honest, too. He listened carefully. The girl who loved you in high school fell in love with an idea. She placed a gentle hand over her heart. The woman standing in front of you today needs time to know the real man. He nodded immediately. I understand. She smiled again. If what you're feeling is real, it will still be here tomorrow. And the day after that. He laughed softly. I've never been a patient man. Then perhaps, she replied with a playful sparkle in her eyes, it's time you learned. For the first time, Seo-jun realized that love wasn't about winning someone's heart in a single grand gesture. It was about showing up, consistently and sincerely, until trust grew naturally. As they resumed walking side by side beneath the fading evening sky, neither reached for the other's hand. They didn't need to. For the first time, they were walking in the same direction. Not as strangers bound by the past, but as two people choosing to discover what the future might hold together. 2 weeks passed. Seo-jun kept his promise. He didn't overwhelm Naomi with flowers. He didn't send extravagant gifts. He didn't invent reasons to knock on her door every evening. Instead, he simply showed up. Some mornings, he held the elevator because he saw her rushing down the hallway with her camera bags. Some evenings, he carried heavy groceries without asking for anything in return. When he learned that the cafe downstairs often forgot Naomi's order, he quietly spoke to the owner, not to demand special treatment, but to make sure they got her name right. Small things, almost invisible things. The kind of things Naomi photographed every day. The kind of things she had once wished someone would do for her. And slowly, without realizing it, she stopped expecting him to leave after each kind gesture. One Saturday afternoon, Naomi returned home carrying 3 memory cards filled with photographs from a documentary project. As she stepped out of the elevator, she found Seo-jun sitting on the hallway floor outside his apartment. His suit jacket was folded beside him. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows. A toolbox lay open in front of him. She blinked. What happened? He looked up and smiled sheepishly. I locked myself out. She stared at him. The great CEO? The very same. You don't use fingerprints? I usually do. But the system froze after the maintenance update. Naomi crossed her arms. So now you're sitting on the floor. I've accepted my fate. She couldn't help laughing. You look ridiculous. I've been told. She unlocked her apartment. I have tea. He looked hopeful. Until the locksmith arrives? She sighed dramatically. I suppose I shouldn't leave my neighbor homeless. He stood immediately. I knew you'd save me. Don't get used to it. Inside Naomi's apartment, Seo-jun looked around. The place had changed. Several framed photographs from the exhibition had replaced older ones. Fresh lilies stood in a glass vase on the dining table. Music played softly in the background. It felt like home. Naomi disappeared into the kitchen. What kind of tea? Surprise me. That's risky. I trust you. She paused for the briefest second before continuing. That sentence had sounded surprisingly natural. As the kettle began to whistle, Seo-jun wandered toward the bookshelf. He recognized many of the photography books she owned. Others were journals, travel guides, history books. One small wooden box caught his attention. Its lid had been carved with delicate cherry blossoms. He wasn't trying to pry. He simply admired the craftsmanship. Naomi returned carrying 2 cups of tea. My grandmother made that. He looked at the box. It's beautiful. She smiled softly. It is. May I ask what's inside? Her smile faded slightly. Old memories. I don't usually open it. Seo-jun nodded. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. She looked at the box for several seconds. Then, almost as if surprising herself, she picked it up and carried it to the coffee table. I suppose it's time. She sat opposite him. The room suddenly felt quieter. Even the music seemed distant. Naomi lifted the lid. Inside lay pieces of another life. An old student ID card, a faded blue ribbon from a school festival, movie ticket stubs, a dried cherry blossom pressed between notebook pages. and several photographs. Seo Jun recognized the first one immediately. The basketball court, the annual sports festival. He was in almost every picture, sometimes laughing with teammates, sometimes receiving a trophy, sometimes walking across campus, completely unaware that someone behind a camera had captured the moment. He looked at Naomi. "You kept all of these?" She nodded. "I almost threw them away when I graduated. But I couldn't." She picked up one photograph. "I told myself that one day they'd stop meaning anything." "Did they?" She smiled sadly. "Eventually." He studied the photograph in silence. "You really loved me." "No," Naomi corrected gently. "I loved the version of you I imagined." She leaned back. "We hardly spoke. You weren't cruel. You weren't arrogant. You simply lived your life, and I watched it from a distance." She picked up another photograph. This one showed the school auditorium during graduation rehearsal. Seo Jun was standing on stage. Naomi was hidden in the shadows behind the camera. "You know what the saddest part was?" He shook his head. "I convinced myself that if I became prettier, smarter, more interesting, you'd notice me." She laughed quietly at her younger self. "So I joined clubs, volunteered, won photography competitions, learned Korean until I spoke it like a native. I kept thinking, maybe this time." Seo Jun lowered his eyes. Every word felt heavier than the last, but nothing changed. "No," she smiled gently, "because you weren't looking. And that's okay." "It really is." He looked at her. "How can you say that?" "Because now I understand something I didn't understand at 17. She folded her hands around her teacup. "My worth was never supposed to depend on whether one boy noticed me." The room fell silent. Seo Jun swallowed hard. "I've been thinking about that." She looked at him. "If I had noticed you back then, would we be sitting here today?" Naomi considered the question carefully. "I don't think so." He frowned. "Why?" "Because I wasn't this Naomi. And you weren't this Seo Jun." She smiled. "We would have been two teenagers trying to figure ourselves out. And we probably would have broken each other's hearts." He laughed softly. "You're probably right. I'm almost certain." Naomi reached into the box one final time. At the very bottom lay a sealed white envelope. Its edges had yellowed with age. She stared at it for a long moment. "I wrote this during our final year." Seo Jun looked at the envelope. "You never gave it to me?" She shook her head. "I was too afraid." "What does it say?" "I don't remember every word." She smiled nervously. "I haven't read it in years." His voice was gentle. "Would you?" Naomi hesitated, then slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a neatly folded letter. Her own 17-year-old handwriting greeted her. She took a deep breath and began to read. "Dear Kang Seojun, you probably don't know who I am. That's okay. I don't expect you to. I only wanted to thank you. Watching you be kind to people made school feel less lonely. You smiled at everyone, even if you never looked long enough to see me. I hope one day someone loves you for who you are. And I hope one day I learn to love myself the same way." Naomi stopped reading. Her voice caught. She folded the letter carefully before placing it back into the envelope. Tears shimmered in her eyes, though none fell. "I never finished it." Seo Jun couldn't speak. His chest felt painfully tight. He realized something that shattered him, far more than Naomi pretending not to know him at the reunion. The greatest love he had almost lost had never demanded anything from him. It had only wished him happiness. Naomi. His voice was barely above a whisper. I can't change the boy who walked past you. A tear finally escaped down Naomi's cheek. I know. But if you'll let me, he looked into her eyes with complete sincerity. I'd like to become the man who never walks past you again. Naomi closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them, the sadness was still there. But so was hope. For the first time since high school, she believed that perhaps the future didn't have to be held hostage by the past. The letter stayed on the coffee table long after Naomi folded it. Neither of them spoke. Seo-jun looked at the envelope again. I don't think I've ever received a letter like that. Naomi gave a faint smile. You didn't. I know. I mean, he searched for the right words. I've received congratulations, business proposals, birthday cards, but never something that honest. She looked down at her teacup. It was written by a 17-year-old girl. I don't even recognize her anymore. I think I would have liked her. Naomi chuckled. No, you would have walked right past her. The words weren't meant to wound, but they landed with painful accuracy. Seo-jun lowered his eyes. You're right. A knock interrupted the silence. The locksmith, Seo-jun guessed. Naomi stood and opened the door. Instead, Amina walked in carrying 2 shopping bags. I brought dessert because She stopped. Her eyes moved from Naomi to Seo-jun, to the old photographs spread across the coffee table. Oh, she smiled knowingly. I picked an interesting time. Naomi laughed. You always do. Amina greeted Seo-jun politely. I hope she isn't embarrassing herself. Seo-jun smiled. Actually, she's teaching me. Amina raised an eyebrow. That's new. She placed the dessert on the kitchen counter. I'll leave before I become the third wheel. You don't have to. Oh, I absolutely do. She winked at Naomi before whispering just loudly enough for Seo-jun to hear, Don't make him wait forever. Naomi rolled her eyes. Amina, I'm leaving. The apartment door closed behind her. The silence returned. This time, it felt lighter. An hour later, the locksmith finally called. I'm outside. Seo-jun stood. I suppose that's my cue. Naomi walked him to the door. Just before he stepped into the hallway, he turned back. Would you have given me that letter if I had noticed you? She thought for a moment. No. He looked surprised. I would have been too shy. He laughed. So either way, I never would have received it. I guess not. He smiled. I'm glad I heard it today. So am I. Over the next several days, something changed between them. Not dramatically, not overnight. It was quieter than that. When Naomi worked late editing photographs, Seo-jun would leave a cup of hot tea outside her apartment with a small note. Don't forget to rest. No signature. She knew who it was. When Seo-jun skipped lunch because of meetings, he would return home to find neatly packed containers of homemade food outside his door. No message, no explanation, just food. He smiled every single time. They never spoke about it. They didn't need to. One Friday evening, Professor Kim invited Naomi and Seo-jun to dinner at his home. I refused to hear excuses. I'm cooking. You'll both come. There was no arguing with him. His house sat in a quiet neighborhood tucked away from Seoul's crowded streets. Traditional, warm, filled with books. Professor Kim's wife welcomed them with bright smiles. So these are my favorite students. Naomi laughed. You only have one student. Professor Kim pointed at Seo-jun. I've adopted another. Dinner was simple: braised short ribs, steamed vegetables, rice, homemade kimchi, nothing extravagant, everything delicious. As they ate, Professor Kim watched them carefully. Finally, he spoke. "Do you know why my wife and I have been married for 38 years? Seo-jun smiled. "Because you fell in love." Professor Kim shook his head. "No. We stayed." The room grew quiet. He continued. "Falling in love is easy. Choosing the same person, again and again, is the difficult part." His wife reached over and squeezed his hand. He smiled at her without looking. The gesture was so natural it almost went unnoticed. Naomi noticed. So did Seo-jun. After dinner, Professor Kim asked Seo-jun to help carry books into his study. As soon as the door closed, the older man looked at him seriously. "Tell me something." "Yes, Professor." "What do you want from Naomi?" Seo-jun answered without hesitation. "I want her to trust me." Professor Kim folded his arms. "And after that, I want to make her happy." The professor nodded slowly. "Good. But remember this. You cannot spend your life trying to compensate for the boy you used to be." Seo-jun frowned. "I don't understand." "If every kind thing you do comes from guilt, you'll eventually become exhausted." The words sank in. You must love Naomi because of who she is today, not because you regret yesterday. Seo-jun remained silent. Professor Kim smiled gently. "I believe you already know the difference." Meanwhile, Naomi helped Mrs. Kim wash the dishes. The older woman smiled as she dried a plate. "He's different." Naomi looked up. "Who?" "Kang Seo-jun." "You've changed him." Naomi shook her head. "I don't think people change because of other people." Mrs. Kim smiled knowingly. "No. They change because they finally become honest with themselves." She placed the last plate into the cabinet. "Do you love him?" Naomi froze. Mrs. Kim laughed softly. "You don't have to answer me. You only have to answer yourself." On the drive home, neither Naomi nor Seo-jun said much. It was peaceful, comfortable. At Naomi's apartment door, she turned toward him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For today." He smiled. "I should be thanking you." She tilted her head. "Why?" "You've shown me something I didn't know I was missing." "What?" He looked at her quietly. "A life where people matter more than achievements." Her heart stirred. This wasn't the polished CEO speaking. This was simply Seo-jun. She unlocked her apartment door. Before going inside, she looked back. "Would you like to come with me tomorrow?" He blinked. "Where?" "I'm photographing the sunrise at the East Sea." "It means leaving at 4 in the morning." He smiled. "I'll set 3 alarms." She laughed. "I thought CEOs liked sleeping in on Saturdays." "I'd rather watch the sunrise with a photographer." For a brief second, they simply looked at one another. Then Naomi nodded. 4 o'clock. "I'll be ready." She stepped inside and gently closed the door. Leaning against it, she smiled to herself. Not because Seo-jun had said all the right things, but because, for the first time, she believed he meant every one of them. Outside in the hallway, Seo-jun slipped his hands into his pockets and looked toward the closed door. He wasn't trying to erase the past anymore. He couldn't. Instead, he was learning something much more important. Love wasn't about rewriting old chapters. It was about writing better ones together. At exactly 3:45 a.m., Naomi Brooks stepped out of her apartment wearing a cream-colored sweater, dark jeans, hiking boots, and a light windbreaker. Her camera backpack rested comfortably on her shoulders. The hallway was quiet. Most of Seoul was still asleep. As she locked her door, the apartment beside hers opened. Kang Seojun stepped out carrying 2 insulated travel mugs and a small paper bag. He looked unusually relaxed. No tailored suit, no expensive watch, just a navy hoodie, beneath a gray jacket and a pair of sneakers. Naomi blinked. "I almost didn't recognize you." He smiled. "I left the CEO at home." She laughed. "Good. I was hoping he'd sleep in." He held up one of the travel mugs. "Coffee? You remembered. You once said sunrise without coffee should be illegal." "I actually said that." "You did." She accepted the mug, surprised that he had remembered something she'd mentioned weeks earlier. "Thank you." "My pleasure." An hour later, their SUV left the expressway and followed a winding coastal road toward Gangneung, where the first sunrise over the East Sea painted the horizon before anywhere else in mainland South Korea. The city lights slowly disappeared behind them. Neither felt pressured to fill the silence. Soft music played through the speakers. Occasionally, they pointed out something amusing. A sleepy fishing village, a lone convenience store glowing in the darkness, or the first hints of dawn appearing beyond the mountains. Halfway through the drive, Seojun glanced toward Naomi. She had lowered the passenger window slightly. The cool morning air played with the loose curls framing her face. "You always travel with the window open?" She smiled. "It helps me wake up." "I thought coffee did that." "Coffee wakes my body. The wind wakes my heart," he chuckled. Only a photographer would say something like that. By 5:20 a.m., they stood on Onmok Beach. The shoreline was almost empty. Gentle waves rolled onto the sand with a rhythmic hush. A few fishermen prepared their boats in the distance. Naomi immediately lifted her camera. She moved instinctively, patiently, waiting, watching, not photographing, just observing. Seojun stood several feet away, careful not to interrupt. Finally she whispered, "There." Click. The first ray of sunlight broke over the horizon. Golden light spilled across the sea. A little boy, no older than 6, reached for his father's hand as they watched the sunrise together. Click. Naomi smiled. "That's the one." Seojun walked closer. "What made you choose that moment?" She lowered the camera. "Because the father wasn't looking at the sunrise. He was looking at his son." For the next hour, they wandered along the beach. They talked about everything: their favorite books, childhood dreams, the worst meals they'd ever cooked, the countries Naomi hoped to photograph, the places in Korea Seojun had never visited despite living there his whole life. It felt easy, as though they had known each other far longer than they actually had. Eventually, they found a small seaside cafe. Its windows overlooked the water. Fresh pastries filled the air with the scent of butter and cinnamon. They settled into a quiet corner. The elderly owner approached with a warm smile. "You two are up early." "We came for the sunrise," Naomi replied. The woman nodded approvingly. "The best reason." As she walked away, she looked back at them with a gentle grin. "You make a lovely couple." Naomi instinctively looked at Seojun. This time, neither of them rushed to correct her. Their breakfast arrived: warm bread, eggs, fresh fruit, hot tea. As they ate, Seojun noticed Naomi watching the people around them more than the ocean. "You do that all the time." She looked at him. "What?" "You watch people." "I suppose I do." "Why?" She rested her chin lightly on one hand. "Because people tell the truth when they think no one is paying attention." He smiled. And what do I do when I think no one's watching? She studied him for a second. You become quiet. I do? You stop performing. His smile faded into thoughtful silence. She wasn't wrong. For years, he had always been CEO Kang Seo-jun, always expected to have answers, always expected to be confident, always expected to succeed. Around Naomi, he didn't feel that pressure. After breakfast, they strolled through a nearby coastal market. An elderly vendor selling handmade bracelets called out cheerfully, "Young man, you should buy one for your girlfriend." Seo-jun looked at Naomi. She looked back at him. Then both laughed. The vendor misunderstood their laughter. "Ah, so you're not dating yet." He picked up 2 simple woven bracelets. "No problem. Start here. They're good luck." Naomi smiled politely. "They're beautiful." Before she could reach for her wallet, Seo-jun quietly paid. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." The elderly vendor tied one bracelet around Naomi's wrist, then handed the other to Seo-jun. "No." He shook his head. "I'll put it on myself." The old man clicked his tongue. "That's not how it works." He smiled knowingly. "If you want it to last, she has to tie yours." Naomi laughed softly. The old man looked so sincere that refusing felt impossible. She gently took the bracelet. "May I?" Seo-jun extended his wrist without hesitation. Her fingers brushed against his skin as she tied the knot carefully. Neither noticed the old vendor smiling to himself. "There." She stepped back. "It fits." He looked at the simple woven bracelet. It probably cost less than a cup of coffee. Yet somehow, it felt more valuable than the luxury watches waiting at home. On the drive back to Seoul, Naomi scrolled through the morning's photographs. Suddenly, she paused. "What?" She turned the camera toward him. One photograph filled the screen. He hadn't realized she'd taken it. He was standing alone on the beach, hands in his pockets, watching the sunrise, not posing, not smiling for anyone, just present. "When did you take that?" "You weren't looking." He stared at the image. "I've never liked photographs of myself." She smiled. "That's because you've only seen photographs where you're trying to be someone." He looked at her. "And this one?" "This one." She held his gaze. "Looks like the real you." For a long moment, neither spoke. The compliment touched him more deeply than she realized. They reached Han River Heights just before noon. The elevator carried them toward the penthouse floor. Neither wanted the morning to end. As the doors opened, Naomi stepped into the hallway. "So," Seo-jun said with a nervous smile, "I have a question." She turned. "Go ahead." He took a slow breath. "This morning, I wasn't trying to impress you. I wasn't trying to make up for the past. I simply enjoyed spending time with you." "So did I." His heart skipped. She walked a little closer. "Which is why—" She smiled warmly. "I'd like to make something clear." He waited. "Today wasn't neighbors having breakfast." "No?" She shook her head. "It wasn't old classmates catching up either." A playful sparkle appeared in her eyes. "Kang Seo-jun." She reached for the woven bracelet on his wrist. "Consider this our first date." For a moment, he simply stared at her. Then he laughed. A deep, genuine laugh that echoed through the quiet hallway. "I was beginning to think you'd never say it." Naomi laughed too. "I wanted to make you wait." "You succeeded." She started toward her apartment before looking back over her shoulder. "Oh, one more thing." "Yes?" "Our second date is your responsibility." Before he could ask what she meant, she disappeared into her apartment. The door closed softly. Seo-jun stood alone in the hallway, unable to stop smiling. He looked down at the simple woven bracelet around his wrist. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't flashy. But it reminded him of something he'd finally learned. The best things in life were never won in a single moment. They were earned, one honest step at a time. And for the first time in years, Kang Seo-jun wasn't looking ahead to his next business deal or career milestone. He was looking forward to planning a second date with the woman who had once loved him in silence, and who was now choosing, slowly and freely, to love the man he had become. 1 year later, spring returned to Seoul. Cherry blossoms once again painted the streets in soft shades of pink and white, just as they had the year Naomi Brooks first arrived as a quiet scholarship student with a second-hand camera and a heart full of dreams. This time, everything was different. The same city, the same river, the same blossoms. But Naomi was no longer searching the crowd for a boy who didn't know she existed. She already knew where the man she loved would be, probably standing in her kitchen, stealing breakfast. Seo-jun, a guilty voice answered immediately. I'm not doing anything. Naomi walked into the kitchen and stopped. Her fiancé, although he still insisted on calling himself your extremely handsome boyfriend whenever anyone asked, stood in front of the stove with half a strawberry hanging from his mouth. Her freshly baked pancakes had mysteriously become smaller. She folded her arms. How many? He swallowed quickly. 1? She looked at the plate. There were 12. There are, he counted silently. 9. Naomi raised an eyebrow. So you ate 3. They were small. They were not. They looked lonely. She laughed. You realize you're a billionaire arguing with pancakes. I'm defending hungry people. You mean yourself? Exactly. She shook her head, trying and failing to hide her smile. I should have hidden them. You've underestimated my investigative skills. I certainly did. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Seo-jun still lived next door. Officially. Unofficially. He spent more nights in Naomi's apartment than his own. His wardrobe had quietly migrated into her guest room. His favorite coffee mug permanently occupied one corner of her kitchen. His running shoes somehow always ended up beside her front door. One evening, Amina had walked in, looked around, and simply said, So, which apartment do you actually live in? Neither Naomi nor Seo-jun had been able to answer. That Saturday morning, they drove across Seoul toward a small community center. Naomi still organized free photography workshops every month. Only now, the program had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. With funding from JM Nexus Holdings and several charitable organizations, cameras had been donated to children from low-income families across the city. Dozens of volunteers now helped. Professor Kim proudly referred to it as Naomi's greatest masterpiece. You've taught children to see the world differently, he often said. No photograph will ever be more important than that. As they entered the community center, excited voices filled the hallway. Teacher Naomi! Children rushed toward her. Some hugged her waist. Others proudly held up photographs they'd taken during the week. Look! I photographed my grandmother. I took one of my puppy. I captured my little brother crying. Naomi laughed. Poor little brother. Then another small voice shouted, Teacher! A 7-year-old girl pointed toward Seo-jun. Did you bring your husband again? The room exploded with giggles. Seo-jun looked at Naomi with exaggerated seriousness. I think they've promoted me. Naomi covered her face. We've talked about this. The little girl frowned. But he always comes. He helps us. He carries things. He buys snacks. My daddy says only husbands do that. The adults burst into laughter. Even Naomi couldn't stop smiling. Seo-jun knelt beside the little girl. What if... He whispered dramatically. I'm still applying for the job. The child considered this carefully, then nodded. I think you'll get hired. After the workshop ended, Professor Kim approached carrying a thick envelope. I've been waiting for today. Naomi accepted it. What is it? Open it. Inside was an official letter. She read the first few lines before her eyes widened. No. Professor Kim grinned. Yes. The Seoul Metropolitan Government had approved her proposal to establish a permanent photography education center for underprivileged children. Funding had been secured. The building had already been selected. Construction would begin within months. Naomi looked up, speechless. I don't know what to say. Professor Kim smiled warmly. Say yes. She laughed through tears. Yes. As everyone celebrated, Seo-jun quietly stepped away and walked onto the center's small rooftop. He looked out across the city. A familiar voice joined him moments later. You disappeared. Naomi stood beside him, still holding the approval letter. I needed a minute. She leaned against the railing. So did I. For several moments, they simply admired the skyline. Then Seo-jun spoke. Do you remember? He smiled to himself. The reunion? Naomi laughed softly. How could I forget? You asked if we'd met before. I did. You nearly destroyed my confidence. I think your confidence survived. Barely. She nudged his shoulder playfully. You recovered remarkably well. I had excellent motivation. Seo-jun reached into his jacket pocket. I've been carrying this around for 3 weeks. Naomi looked curious. What is it? He handed her a folded document. She opened it. At first she frowned in confusion. Then her eyes grew wider with every line. It was a property agreement. A beautiful house overlooking the Han River. Not enormous, not extravagant, just warm, filled with sunlight. Large windows, a spacious studio designed specifically for photography, a small garden, and one room marked simply Future Children's Creative Space. Naomi looked at him. You bought this? He shook his head. No. I found it. I've been waiting to ask you something before I signed anything. Her heart began to race. Seo-jun. He gently took both her hands. We've spent the last year living between 2 apartments. She smiled. That's true. My clothes have officially invaded your closet. They have. I think your coffee machine likes me more than you. It definitely does. He laughed, then his expression softened. I don't want to assume anything. I don't want to rush you. I don't even care where we live. He squeezed her hands gently. But I'd really like to come home to you every day. Naomi felt tears gathering in her eyes. Not because of the house. Not because of the beautiful studio. Not because of the view. But because he hadn't said, I bought us a house. He had asked. He had given her a choice. The same man who once expected life to bend to his confidence now stood before her, waiting patiently for her answer. Naomi looked at the photographs the architect had included, then back at the man she loved. She smiled through happy tears. I have one condition. He blinked. Anything. The studio. She held up the blueprint. Belongs to the children as much as it belongs to me. His eyes softened. I was hoping you'd say that. She laughed. You already planned for it. I know you. You do, He wrapped his arms around her, and she rested her head against his chest. Below them, the laughter of children drifted up from the courtyard. Neither noticed Professor Kim watching quietly from the window. Mrs. Kim slipped her hand into her husband's. "They look happy." Professor Kim smiled. "They're not happy because they found each other." He watched Seo-jun brush a cherry blossom petal from Naomi's hair with gentle care. "They're happy because they learned how to see each other." And somewhere deep inside, Professor Kim knew the story wasn't ending. One chapter was closing. The most beautiful one was just about to begin. 6 months later, Naomi Brooks stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of their new home, watching leaves drift gently across the garden. The house was everything they had hoped for. Warm, peaceful, filled with laughter. The photography studio overlooked a small courtyard where children from Naomi's foundation came every Saturday to learn, create, and dream. Seo-jun had kept his promise. He hadn't built her a mansion. He had built her a home, a place where everyone felt welcome. Even Professor Kim joked that he visited so often he deserved his own bedroom. "Naomi!" Seo-jun's voice echoed from downstairs. "We're going to be late." She smiled. "I'm coming." Today marked another milestone. Seoul International High School, 15th Alumni Reunion. 5 years had passed since the reunion that changed everything. The same school, many of the same classmates, but two completely different people. Naomi picked up a small velvet box from her dresser. Inside rested a simple engagement ring. She slipped it onto her finger. It still made her smile every single time she looked at it. Seo-jun hadn't proposed in a luxury hotel, or on a private yacht, or beneath fireworks. He had proposed inside the Children's Photography Center after one little girl had innocently asked, "Teacher Naomi, why does Mr. Kang look at you the same way my daddy looks at my mommy?" Everyone had laughed, including Naomi. Seo-jun had simply smiled, knelt on one knee and said, "I was planning to wait until dinner, but she's already asked the most important question." Naomi had cried before he even finished asking. The drive to the reunion felt strangely familiar. "So," Seo-jun glanced toward her. "Nervous?" "A little." "You?" "A lot," she laughed. "You've negotiated international business deals." "I know. But your former classmates are terrifying." She squeezed his hand. "You'll survive." "I hope so." The reunion was once again held at the Grand Aurora Hotel. As they stepped into the ballroom together, conversations paused. Then smiles spread across familiar faces. "They're here! Kang Seo-jun! Naomi!" People hurried over to greet them. Ji-hoon embraced Seo-jun. "I never thought I'd see the day." "What day?" "The day our school's biggest heartbreaker became hopelessly devoted to one woman." The room erupted with laughter. Seo-jun shrugged proudly. "I had excellent motivation." Across the ballroom, Amina rolled her eyes. "He's still dramatic." Naomi smiled. "Very." The evening passed with laughter, old photographs, and stories from high school. Eventually, the reunion host stepped onto the stage. "I have a fun idea." The room quieted. "We've invited everyone to share one unforgettable memory from our school days." Volunteers came one after another. Embarrassing moments, funny teachers, sports victories, school trips. Then, the host smiled mischievously. "I think we all remember the reunion 5 years ago." Laughter immediately filled the room. Several classmates looked toward Naomi and Seo-jun. The host grinned. "I'll never forget the moment Naomi looked at Seo-jun and asked." He imitated her politely. "I'm sorry. Have we met before?" The ballroom exploded with laughter. Even Seo-jun buried his face in his hands. "I'll never escape this." "You won't," Ji-hoon replied. The host smiled. "Naomi, would you mind answering one question?" She accepted the microphone. He looked at her warmly. "Do you remember Kang Seo-jun now?" The room became completely silent. Everyone waited. Even Seo-jun. Naomi looked around the ballroom, then at the classmates who had once watched a quiet black scholarship student carry a camera through the school hallways. Finally, she turned toward the man standing beside her. Her voice was calm, steady, filled with affection. "I'd like to confess something." The audience leaned forward. "I lied." Soft laughter rippled through the room. "I remembered him the second I saw him." Seo-jun's eyes widened. "I remembered his smile. The way he loosened his tie after basketball practice. The way he always thanked the cafeteria staff. The way he held doors open without expecting praise." She smiled through tears. "I remembered everything." Silence settled over the ballroom. "So why did you pretend?" Someone asked softly. Naomi looked down for a brief moment before lifting her eyes again. "Because I had spent 10 years becoming someone who believed her worth wasn't measured by whether one person noticed her." She turned toward Seo-jun. "If I had greeted him like the 17-year-old girl inside me wanted to, I would have become that girl again." Her voice trembled. "And I had worked too hard to grow." Several classmates quietly wiped away tears. Naomi continued. "So I chose to meet him, not as the girl who had loved him in silence, but as the woman I had become." She looked directly into Seo-jun's eyes. "And I'm grateful I did. Because the man standing beside me today isn't the boy I once dreamed about." She reached for his hand. "He's better." Seo-jun's eyes filled with tears. Naomi smiled. "I never forgot you. I simply waited until we could truly see each other." The ballroom erupted into applause. Some people openly cried. Even Professor Kim discreetly removed his glasses to wipe his eyes. The reunion ended late that evening. Instead of driving home immediately, Naomi and Seo-jun stopped at the old campus. The security guard recognized them and smiled. "Go ahead. Just don't stay all night." "We'll try," Seo-jun promised. They walked slowly through the quiet grounds. The basketball court, the auditorium, the library. Everything looked smaller than they remembered. Finally, they reached the old cherry blossom tree. It was the same tree Naomi had once photographed from a distance. The same place where countless silent hopes had been born. Seo-jun looked up into its branches. "So," he asked quietly, "is this where you took all those pictures?" Naomi laughed. "Most of them." "You were really that sneaky?" "I preferred the word observant." He smiled. "I wish I'd turned around." She stepped closer. "If you had, we probably wouldn't be here." He thought about that. She was right. The years apart had shaped them. The heartbreak had taught them. The waiting had prepared them. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. An old photograph. The very first photograph of him she had accidentally dropped onto his balcony. He had secretly kept a copy. "I want you to have this." She looked at it and smiled. "I already do." "I know. But this one belongs to us." She accepted it carefully, then slipped it into his jacket pocket instead. "No. You keep it." "Why?" She rested her head against his shoulder. "So you'll never forget that someone was always quietly cheering for you, even before you knew she existed. Seo-jun wrapped his arm around her. I'll never forget again. Above them, the autumn leaves rustled softly in the night breeze. The same campus that had once witnessed a silent, unnoticed love now stood as a quiet witness to a love that had been chosen, nurtured, and returned. Some stories begin with two people falling in love at the right time. Theirs began with one person waiting, then another learning to see. And in the end, neither of them was rescued by fate alone. They were transformed by humility, patience, forgiveness, and the courage to become the people they needed to be before they found each other. As they walked away hand in hand beneath the old cherry blossom tree, the campus lights fading behind them, Naomi looked up at Seo-jun with the same gentle smile that had first captured his heart. This time, there were no unanswered questions, no forgotten names, no silent longing. Only two people who had finally learned the simplest and most important truth of all. Being remembered is flattering, but being truly seen is love. Loved this story? Subscribe now for more heartfelt Afro-Korean love stories, and share this video with a friend who believes in second chances.